Philosophy itself, at least in the West, did not start in Athens. It started, well, depends on who you ask, but it started in Miletus, which is a city it's in modern day Turkey, but it's east Athens. The first philosophers we hear of, Thales and Anaximander and Anaximenes, were all from Thales, from Miletus. And but it definitely moved to Athens, and Athens became the center of Western philosophy in the beginning. Well, why? For a number of reasons. One of them, of course, was that Athens was a very prosperous city, and in order to philosophize, you have to be in a place where people are going to, support you otherwise, or pay you, or support you in one way or another. So it has to be economically viable place. Otherwise, people tend to be concerned more about how to put food on their plate at night, and not about sort of philosophizing.
Yeah.
So one reason is that it was a prosperous city, but it wasn't the only prosperous city in Greece, for sure. What set it aside is that it was, of course, also the center of democracy in Greece. Right. So now democracy for the Athenians was something different from what we understand today. It was actually literally, direct democracy by direct majority. The assembly would vote, and if you had a majority, you win the day. So it was, in a sense, it was a limited democracy because, of course, it excluded, people who were slaves, for sure. Women were excluded, et cetera, et cetera. Nevertheless, for the time, that was by far the most democratic place in the world. It's the birthplace of democracy. Well, democracy also means that freedom of speech was a value in Athens. It was highly valued. And so both education and freedom of speech were highly valued. That's what made for fertile grounds for philosophers, that even if they were not from Athens, they came to Athens in order to practice their trade and to talk to people and so on and so forth. Then went on for a number of centuries. It ended essentially around 86 BCE because at that point Athens made a mistake. This is way after the beginning of Stoicism. This is way after the death of Alexander the Great. And what happened was that although the Roman Empire had not started yet, we're close to the beginning of the Roman Empire, but not quite. And what happened in around 86 BCE is that Athens made the mistake of aligning itself with King Mithridates of Pontus, which was an enemy of the Romans. And it's a mistake because it turns out the Romans, won. And so the Romans punished, the Athenians as a result. And the Roman general Sulla marched into Athens and basically put fire in the whole place, looted the place, brought a bunch of statues and documents and books back to Rome. That caused a diaspora of philosophers who who left Athens because it was no longer a viable place where to practice their trade, and they went in a bunch of other places, including primarily Rome. So that tells you that you need a place that is, doing well economically, wealthy, generating wealth, that is open to freedom of speech, so a democratic place, and that is, viable in terms of sort of prosperous in a sense. And you can also ask a related question, which is, why is it that all of these philosophies that we refer to as Hellenistic appeared in pretty much the same short period of time, or a number of decades? And likely the answer there is that the situation was very interesting from a historical and perspective at the time. We're talking about the Hellenistic period that starts with the death of Alexander the Great and ends with the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE. The Battle of Actium is where Octavian, who later became the first Roman emperor, beat Cleopatra and Mark Antony. And that was essentially the beginning of the Roman Empire. So we're talking a period of very large turmoil, where things were happening at a grand scale that people had absolutely no control over. Your world was going to be upside down from one moment to Right? First, there was the end of the Peloponnesian War and essentially the destruction of Athens as a major power in Greece. And then Alexander the Great sweeps down and conquers all of Greece and beyond. And then Alexander dies young, and his followers, his heirs, sort of divide the empire into three major chunks, and they start fighting against each other. So more turmoil to come, all the way until the Romans finally get in and sort of settle things down. So one can argue reasonably that a lot of these philosophies arose in a time where there was a lot of turmoil at a grand societal scale, and when people felt like things were outside of their control, they were changing very rapidly, and they needed some kind of point of reference. Interestingly, the same kind of suggestion has been made for other philosophies. It turns out that Buddhism originated in India about 200 or 300 years before Stoicism under very similar social and political conditions. At about the same time, Confucianism originated in China, also under very similar social and political conditions. So one can make the argument that, periods of turmoil are good for philosophy, I suppose.
Yeah.